Jewish spirit animals. Do we believe in that kind of thing? Do we believe that a particular soul could have a connection to a particular species of animal? Let's find out. So, there are 10 spherots, there are 10 divine attributes that God wove into the fabric of all reality. We have these 10 attributes inside us, and they primarily break down into two. We have the seichel, which is the mind, that's the first three attributes. And then we have our midot, our character, which is the rest of the seven other attributes. So we have the 10 inside of us, primarily our mind and our character. Now, it's true that we do have indeed seven aspects of our character, but even these can primarily break down into three: chesed, gevurah, and tiferet. The rest are really just branches and extensions of these three. So let's understand a little bit about them. First, chesed. So chesed is usually translated as kindness, but chesed really means breaking down boundaries, breaking down barriers. So that goes together very well with kindness, because when you're kind to someone else, that's exactly what you're doing. You're breaking down the barriers which could exist between you and that person. If you give them charity, you're saying that you and me are not really so separate from each other, such that our money should be entirely separate. That is the classic version of chesed. However, it's worth noting that there's also a negative version of chesed as well. And that's where it sometimes is important to have boundaries, and to break those down or to blur them would be a negative thing. So, for example, in terms of fidelity or loyalty, sometimes it's important to know when to say no. All of those times when there's a temptation to break through those commitments, to break through those boundaries, and be more fluid in a negative way, that's also, to a certain extent, coming from the attribute of chesed. So that's in terms of chesed. What about gevurah? Gevurah is the other extreme, and gevurah is translated as strength, and it really is about establishing and building up boundaries. So when this too also has good and bad versions. Primarily a good version is, again, when you're meant to be able to say no to things, you're meant to be able to be strong and have self-control. That's the greatest version of gevurah. However, of course, there is a negative side to it as well. If it's used in a negative way, it could be being overly harsh to someone else, being stingy, refusing to give to them when you really should. That's a time when there should be a connection to someone else being built, and there's a separation instead. So that would be a negative twist on gevurah. And third, we have tiferet, which is harmony. This is about bringing everything together and living in a balanced way. We're activating this attribute of tiferet when we are trying to eat in moderation or sleep in moderation, sleep the right amount, when we are trying to be holistic in terms of our learning or other areas of our life, when we're doing this life in balance. So that's tiferet. And unlike the first two, which are versions of extremes and therefore can bring certain negativities along with them, there's really basically no negative of tiferet. If you're living life in balance, even though it might be hard to tell exactly what is the balanced thing to do in a particular case, but if we find the balance, then basically most of the time we're going to be living the right kind of life. So that's our primary midot, our character attributes. We have chesed, gevurah, tiferet, the kindness and strength and balance. Now, this brings us to our animals. So, as we mentioned, God wove these attributes into all of reality. So it won't be surprising that we'll find parallels also in the animal kingdom. On the right side, on the chesed side, we have the wild animals. Wild animals are animals which don't have boundaries. And so when we are being kind to someone else, when we're giving to someone else, we're activating the lion inside ourselves. On the other hand, we have gevurah, which in the animal kingdom corresponds to the domesticated animals. So when we are having appropriate boundaries and self-control, we're activating the ox inside ourselves. And finally, in terms of tiferet, we have the birds. Birds are people, they are entities that live with balance. In order to have flight, that is something that you need to have. You need to be balanced as you traverse through the skies. So when we are living a life in balance and moderation, we are activating the eagle inside ourselves.